I think many people are curious about how you approach a new piece and how do you begin working on it? Could you walk us through the process?
Well, that depends on the piece. And also, this has evolved over the years. I do have a pretty good sight reading. So if it's something I've never looked at before, I just usually read through it and try to understand. If I never heard the piece, I read through it and I try to understand what the piece is about, and try to see if there is really a connection with the piece. And then this will also tell me what needs to be worked the most. But usually I learn very quickly. And so my process is always what I tell students. Don't get caught up in the mechanical difficulties. If there are different difficult passages, for example, don't get bogged down and stuck in trying to solve those, just isolating them. Try to understand their musical meaning. Try to understand how they fit into the picture. And then try to understand how physically you have to use your entire body to convey what needs to be conveyed. Because I feel that too often students narrowly zoom in to these passages and then just try to work them out digitally. And it is way more difficult that way, and it sometimes doesn't work, and it wastes a lot of time. So that's my process. Understand the music and what it means, and then find ways to express through sound what needs to be expressed. Also, finding fingerings is very important because it can cut your learning and your arriving at proficiency. It can cut it much shorter if you find smart fingerings. Fingering is so important. But musical understanding must come first. Now, if it's a piece I have never looked at but already know, like pieces from the repertoire that I heard many times but never looked at the score, then that's probably a different process. It goes even faster because I don't need to understand the piece. I don't need to know which are the most important moments. I just need to figure out how to finger it, and then I can play it. So it just depends on that.
Yeah, so we're on the same page. And your control of sound has always been incredibly stable and refined. How did you build that over time, and how did you actually work on it in practice?
Oh, sound. Well, sound has to do with personal sensibility. I do have the kind of sound I particularly love, which is a sound where the piano hammers are not heard. Unless, I'm generalizing. Of course, there are some times where the piano hammers can be heard. But generally speaking, I like a piano sound that is singing and legato and close to the human voice, or spoken, soft spoken also, whispered, or even more intense, but never harsh and never wooden and never unsophisticated. Never rude. Now, as I said before, if you are playing some piece, for example, Prokofiev's second piano concerto, or some parts of his sonatas 6 or 7, maybe you need to be very harsh by design. That's fine. But what I'm saying is that, unfortunately, the default mode that I find for majority of pianists nowadays, even people who win competitions, is this, to me, insufferable tapping or banging. And yeah, it's just, there is no nuances in the sound. If they play a string of single notes, it sounds like a machine gun. Ta 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 ta. It's just unbearable to me. But unfortunately, nowadays it seems to be very popular. So that being said, if you love a particular type of sound, when you get into the practice room, that's like your personal lab. And you're like a chemist. You have to experiment with different materials and mixing to find the right amount of everything and the right ingredients. So you search for the sound until you find it.
And I often think of technique as the way we produce sound through our body. It's a word we use all the time in music, yet sometimes it feels abstract. So from my perspective, technique is something we consciously build at first, but eventually it has to dissolve into instinct and almost subconsciously. And in that sense, technique is not just about being able to play all the notes as part of the musical vocabulary to express the character of music. And of course, there's often a period in a musician's life and when they are focused too much on technique and it's becomes isolated from the music itself. So what's your perspective on this?
Exactly what I was saying when I said before that when you find a mechanical passage that is difficult, you should understand its musical meaning and find a way to express that meaning, not only through the fingers, but through the entire body, especially the upper body, the joints, the elbows, the shoulders. And so my approach to this is what people call technique. They are confused because they are actually talking about mechanics. Mechanics are one thing. Technique is another. Technique includes the way you pedal, the way your pedal is connected to your fingers, the way you layer, the way you project the melody. Technique includes the quality of sound, and it also includes finger or wrist or arm agility and strength. It's the whole thing is technique, but it is only something that is to be put to the service of music, expressing music. I mean, it's almost like when you use different techniques to create a painting, if you are a painter, yes, the expert eye can discern which techniques you used. But to the people looking at the painting, they need to find a connection and admire it and feel emotional about it. They don't need to know about the technique that was used. Sorry. I've had a sore throat for a couple of days. So ballet is the same way. Ballet dancers have to practice so much and do so much mechanical work, technical work. But then when they dance on the stage, all people need to know is what it expresses and what it communicates. For us, it's exactly the same thing. So technique is the entire bag of tools, and you have to use every tool that you need in order to arrive at the perfect way of expressing the content of the music that you play, as you see it, as you understand it, and as you think the composer wanted you to.
Yeah. And could you think of a performance that was especially meaningful in your life?
My own performance?
Yes.
I would say there are many, for sure there are many. But if I were to single out one of them, this would be the day that I played the Schumann concerto in the finals of the Cleveland competition. I think something very special happened to me that day. I don't know, I was particularly inspired. I was not, at the time, the final round of the Cleveland competition was not played with the Cleveland Orchestra. It was played with an orchestra assembled by the competition. It wasn't a bad orchestra, but it wasn't the same as the Cleveland competition, the Cleveland Orchestra, obviously. So I don't know why I was so inspired. I think it was just a moment. I felt the importance of the moment, and I felt the pressure of the moment. And pressure can make you, at least for me, can make you play a lot better, because you end up giving a lot more and feeling a lot more. It heightens everything. And so then I also think I had a wonderful conductor to play with. He was already kind of an elderly gentleman, so he passed away now, but you can find his name mentioned often because he was the assistant conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra for many years when George Szell was the music director. And for example, Glenn Gould states in one of his own books that when he went to Cleveland, he never wanted to play with George Szell. He always wanted to play with Louis Lane. That was his name, Louis Lane. And so I was fortunate enough to play with Louis Lane in the finals of the competition. And so all of it combined, plus I had a beautiful piano to play on. And so I think that performance stayed with me for a long time. And also plus the result of winning the competition. The reaction of the audience afterwards, I will never forget. So it really, I had connected. I feel I've connected with that audience as deeply as I ever connected with any audiences. So all of this makes that performance, plus the piece itself, which I love so much. And also the fact that many people said to me, oh, why are you playing Schumann? You can't win a major competition with Schumann concerto. You have to play bigger concerto, you know. But I deeply loved that piece, and I felt I had something to say with it. And so that's what I decided to play. And yeah, so that's it.
Wow. And you know, most people worry about things like memorization and stage anxiety, what we call it as stage fright. And so would you be willing to share your own experiences and perhaps some advice?
I don't have any magic formula. There are some people who have devised entire lectures on memorization, but I'm sure that there can be some things that one can do to support that. But I love what Ciccolini used to say. He used to say, we don't have memory problems, because the only people who have memory problems are people who maybe slip and hit their head and they have amnesia. Those are people who have memory problems. We have anxiety and we have concentration problems. So the one thing that people need to focus on is how to stay focused, on how to keep the concentration. And this is one of the reasons why I so hate nowadays when I play a concert and the audience is noisy, or they all take their cell phones out and start taking pictures or making recordings. And then sometimes they accidentally play the recording back. You are playing, you play a phrase, and then you hear it back right away while you're still playing. It is so disappointing, because it takes you away. I mean, it takes a lot of experience to stay in the music and not let that. Sometimes I just want to stop, stand up, and tell that person to leave, because it's just so disrespectful of the music and so on. But concentration is the real problem. In any case, I also think that performing anxiety and controlling your memorization on stage comes with practicing on stage. So you have to play frequently in public. You have to play for other people a lot in order to learn about yourself, how to control yourself, how to slow your breathing, how to focus so intensely on the music that you don't allow any other thoughts in your head that can be disruptive, like insecurity. So that is something that can be learned only by doing.
You took the words out of my mouth. How would you define a truly great performance, and what does it depend on?
But that's also very difficult to know exactly, because you usually know a great performance when you hear one, but certain things are difficult to express in words. And also there is the matter of personal taste, of course. But what I really like is when an artist makes me forget about all the technical, mechanical side and makes me focus on the music and tells me a story and pulls me in and lets me enjoy the story. And it could be a piece that I also play where I have my own story, but if their story is different and it's convincing, then it's great. I sometimes teach all day and then go to a concert, and the artist, I'm supposed to be tired of listening to piano for so many hours, but then the artist makes me listen to the music with such fresh ears, because he or she is conveying their own story so convincingly and playing with such fascinating, weaving the magic, creating the atmosphere. That's the thing I hope for when I go to a concert, and that it can stay with me with those emotions and that story for a long time. And so I learned this piece and I played it, and I found then that I had really a connection to contemporary music in this sense, that I liked to discover things that had never been played before. And I won the special prize for the best performance of this piece in the competition.